To the left-hand side for Vieira, who'll play it through to Gabriel Jesus, who's in here for Arsenal. Gabriel Jesus to finish it off. Oh, what a way to do it! Gabriel Jesus seals the points for Arsenal. He's back, and he's back with a bang.
Into the penalty area it goes. Gabriel's header, and it's into the back of the net. Arsenal take an early lead through Gabriel.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the daily Arsenal podcast with me, Harry Symeou.
Hey everybody, hope you're all good. Hope you're all well. Welcome back to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. On this episode, we've got plenty to get our teeth into. We're going to talk about a fantastic piece that James McNicholas, aka Gunnerblog, wrote for The Athletic today, which kind of breaks down Arsenal's position in the transfer market with regards to a lot of different positions, a lot of different players. We'll get into that. We'll break it all down. I think it was a really interesting piece, and there's lots to discuss off the back of that. I also want to talk to you about the latest on Victor Osimhen, because I know it feels like I'm going on about this Osimhen thing every day. Yesterday, I have to say, when I read kind of, the reports that, he was considering or waiting for an offer from both Arsenal and Saudi Arabia, I did start to think, well, he's just in it for the money. All he's interested in is finding some sort of way of maximizing his earnings. And then I thought about it a bit more, and I sort of came to the conclusion last night when I was sitting on my couch that coming from Napoli, who, speaking to some friends of mine that cover and follow Italian football much closer than I do, seemingly really need the money. And so perhaps that's where that angle has come from. And I thought, well, anyway, maybe I'll just mention that in passing on Tuesday's episode, and I won't go into that in too much detail or depth because we covered Osimhen loads yesterday. But then I saw that Gianluca Di Marzio, the man who was, in a lot of people's eyes, the transfer king pre the Fabrizio Romano days, he says that Arsenal are in for Victor Osimhen. He says that Arsenal are nowhere near the release clause in terms of what they'd be willing to pay, but that they are in for Victor Osimhen. I'll talk about Napoli's situation, having spoken to a couple of people earlier today about what it looks like, about why they may just be interested in doing a deal for Victor Osimhen at far less than that release clause, why the man who's coming in to take over as the new manager isn't too keen on Victor Osimhen and has someone in his own mind that could come in and do a better job, and so why Napoli might have to raise funds via Osimhen to make that happen. We'll get into all of that in a little bit more detail later on today's podcast, so make sure you stick with us until the end. Lots and lots of brilliant comments coming through, as always. Great to see so many of you participate in the live chat. I want to say a big hello to Live, to Steve Stone. We've got Jid, we've got Ticking Time Bomb, who says, punctuality, young man. Yeah, you know what? I'm over the being punctual thing. It's an ongoing debate on this channel, isn't it? Look, I was all set up and ready to go, and I know it sounds like I've always got an excuse, but literally, as I went in to grab a drink before I went live, my son had the meltdown of all meltdowns. No idea why. Apparently, I promised him that I'd do some drawing with him, which I definitely didn't do because I knew that I was going to podcast at 5, but now I'm going to have to do afterwards to keep the peace. What else have we got? We've got Johnny Gooch, we've got Junior Gunner, we've got Sammy, Ron, Ogochukwu, George is with us. Super High says, if we're in for Osimhen, where does that leave SESKO? Could we be getting both? Eddie and Jesus are leaving, so maybe. I don't think Gabriel Jesus is leaving. I think there's a good chance that Eddie does, and we'll maybe touch on that a little bit later, but we'll see where we're at. Also, I do want to touch on something else that has been doing the rounds a little bit this afternoon with regards to Manchester City. And I know a lot of you have been mentioning them in the live chat because, well, from a transfer angle. One second, let me just try and find this. Hold on a second. So let me just bring this up from Matt Lawton. Okay, hold on a minute. There's a couple of posts here that I think we need to look at. So let me just share my screen with you guys. 1 second. And we can get into this right away. It wasn't supposed to be at the top of the agenda, but it's moved there now. So, okay. So I read earlier on today, and this is the bit that I was going to discuss, that the hearing into Manchester City's 115 alleged breaches is set for November. That hearing, which is expected to last 6 weeks, could lead to massive fines for the club's owners and possibly even relegation for Pep Guardiola's all-conquering side. Now, this is what I read earlier today, that this hearing was going to take place in November. However, it has since come out from Matt Lawton, and this is an exclusive for the Times, that Manchester City have launched unprecedented legal action against the Premier League. It has sparked civil war among the clubs, with the hearing due to start on June 10th. City describing the Premier League's financial rules as tyranny of the majority. Okay. I don't really know how to react to this because it's just literally dropped. But I was glad that I read that there was a kind of date set for the hearing because, again, I'm not going to get into guilty or not guilty. Again, we've done it 1,000,001 times on this podcast. I've always said that until they are proven guilty, then, we're going to have to just wait and hold tight. But I've also always said that even from a Manchester City point of view, if you're a fan or a player or a manager or any member of staff involved in that club, everything you do feels tarnished until your name is cleared. So you'd surely want to get a move on and get your name cleared so that you can just move on from it. And yeah, you're always going to get jibes from other fans and other clubs and all the rest of it. But if you can clear your name, then that cloud that is looming over Manchester City, that just clouds over every achievement that they manage at this point, it will be gone. The sun will shine through and City will be able to enjoy their success without hearing everybody going 115, 115, 115 every time they achieve something. They are launching legal action against the Premier League. I don't think that's really the way to go if you're innocent, is it? I mean, unless, I mean, what do I know? I just think that the best course of action for Manchester City would be to focus all their efforts on trying to prove their innocence. And if they did that, the Premier League would look silly. And if they did that, they could then move to taking legal action against the Premier League for maybe dragging their name through the mud and sue them on the basis of all the reputational damage it's done, etc., etc. But this just feels, and this is just my gut feeling, I don't know this for a fact, but this just feels like another distraction tactic. Because throughout this process, all we've heard is Manchester City keep delaying this and keep delaying that and appealing requests to provide certain evidence, which has kept this thing going and going and going. This feels like another one of those deflection tactics. Now, that's just my feeling. So we'll have to wait and see. But this is obviously big news. And so I felt it was worth touching on at the start of the show. We are going to focus on that James McNicholas piece in The Athletic. Obviously, I'm not going to read the piece word for word to you. You can go over to The Athletic's website and you can find it. You can sign up to The Athletic, of course, if you want to read this piece in detail. But we will touch on some of the key points from it on this episode. Just quickly on that Man City stuff, Mark Jerome says, sounds like City are thinking that they might lose their case. So they're trying to get other clubs on side to say that the rules are unfair. And listen, there will be clubs that agree that the Premier League's rules and the way that they're doing things at the moment aren't fair, aren't the way they should be, protect some clubs, but don't take into consideration the situation of others. And all of that might be valid, but you know which clubs are going to back them. You know that Nottingham Forest will probably be on board. You know that Everton will probably be on board because these are clubs that have obviously been hit with sanctions as a result of not adhering to the Premier League rules that Manchester City is supposedly complaining about. But this is a whole different issue. Please, let's not dilute the Manchester City issue by pretending it's something else. This is a Premier League club who have been incredibly successful, who have allegedly broken the rules on 115 occasions. 115 charges have been filed against them. I suggest that Manchester City focus on clearing their name, because that's the most important thing. And this legal action about something that is slightly different based on the wording that we're reading, not buying it, not having that. Okay. Let's move into the Arsenal stories. Just very quickly, Murai Ben Carr says, Harry, is the commentary in the intro yours? I mean, you were the commentator. Yes, it is. It is. Commentary from some of the work that I've done over the course of last season, which I really, really enjoyed. Okay, let's move on then to this James McNicholas piece, which I found very, very insightful and interesting. So it's a piece in The Athletic called James McNicholas's, well, it's not called James McNicholas's, it is James McNicholas's transfer deal sheet focused on Arsenal, where he talks a lot about the club's plans for the summer, some of the players that they're linked with, and we're going to go through all of that now. He says that the main objective of Mikel Arteta and Edu going into this window is to add layers to the squad, that when you look back at last season, you look over the course of last season, there was a small group of around about 14 players that shared the majority of the minutes. And we did this in our season review. We talked at length about the fact that Mikel Arteta was only happy to or willing to rotate in certain positions. There were some players that were just untouchable. If they were fit, they were available, and there was no questions asked about that. But also there are a few players that quite frequently came in and out. Leandro Trossard being one of them, for example. The left backs being rotated was quite a common feature over the course of the season. So it does feel like Mikel Arteta has a core group that he really believes in and really trusts. And you did get the impression at certain points that maybe he just didn't trust some of the others that were available to him. Hence why the minutes were spread across a pretty small group of 14 players. And we can all agree that if we want to be more competitive in the cups, if we want to balance our Champions League and Premier League commitments, again, given that the Champions League now has more games in it, we're going to have to rotate a little bit better and a little bit more effectively than we have done in the past. But in order to do that, you probably do need those layers to the squad. And obviously, we're hearing lots of reports and rumors about players that could be potentially departing this summer. Eddie Nketiah, Emile Smith-Rowe, Aaron Ramsdale, just to name a few. And all of those guys do make up a part of the squad. So is it a case of replacing them with players that maybe Mikel Arteta has greater faith in to then enable him to be able to rotate in the way that we probably need to if we're going to be successful on multiple fronts? He talked about the number 9 situation. We've been talking a lot about Benjamin Sesko recently. And he said that there's long been an opinion at Arsenal Football Club that a number 9 is what was needed going into this summer. But obviously Kai Havertz's form in that position has sort of reduced the urgency to go big and go after a number 9. However, if the right number 9 becomes available, if the right option is available to Arsenal, they will go into the market to try and make that happen. He also said that they're open to adding additional attacking players too. So they're not just looking at a number 9. If there's an opportunity to do a deal for a winger, a wide forward, or someone else that they think would add another dimension to Arsenal's attack, then they would be willing and open to doing that. Now, I've put in the title that Declan Rice's role is key to Arsenal's transfer plans. And according to this piece, that is absolutely the case. Now, it goes on to say that because Declan Rice moved into that number 8 position and done very, very well, there is a feeling at Arsenal that actually that's where Declan Rice should continue. Now, he himself in the past has said that he feels more comfortable and believes that his best position actually is at number 6. However, it appears that Arsenal are looking at Declan Rice as a number 8. And there's a few reasons for this. So first of all, he flourished in that position in the second half of the season when he played there far more often. But also, Arsenal believe, according to this piece from James McNicholas, that the market for an 8 is a lot tougher and that there are more options and better options available in the number 6 position. I would say that if you can bring someone in who's a bit of a hybrid that can play both of those roles, that would be the ideal situation, the ideal scenario. But then I think about maybe what's let us down at times. And I know I'm really nitpicking here because we've been fantastic for a good couple of years. But maybe it is that we don't have specialists in some of the positions still. We don't have a specialist, centre forward right now, for example. We don't have a specialist right wing deputy, for example. We haven't had a specialist left back. I know Jurriën Timber was injured, but even when you factor him into the conversation, he's not really a left back, is he? He's a centre back that can play right back that we were going to use at left back. That's the reality of the Jurriën Timber situation. So I do wonder if looking for specialists is kind of the next phase, the next thing that we should be doing. But basically, Arsenal are still, according to this piece, reviewing Declan Rice's season and trying to figure out whether he'd serve them best going forward as a 6 or as an 8. But that they think the 8 market is a lot tougher. And so there's a good chance that Declan Rice is used in that position and Arsenal will go out and bring in a number 6. Who that will be, not entirely sure, but there is some indications a little bit later on in the piece. We'll get to that. He also says that a specialist left back is in the planning. That is something that Arsenal are looking at, and that kind of builds on the point that I was just making about maybe the need to add one of those just to kind of complete the set and complete the team. And he also talks about the goalkeeping situation, which is an interesting one because you'd think it will be sort of one out, one in. Ramsdale probably will leave because I'm sure he'll want to play a lot more football than he's currently playing. And that means that Arsenal need to go into the market and bring in another goalkeeper. But this piece actually highlights that Arsenal could be on the lookout for not just goalkeeper number 2, but goalkeepers number 2 and goalkeeper number 3. We know that Karl Hein is someone that was on that list of players whose contracts are due to expire on the 30th of June, but the Arsenal are in negotiations with him at the moment over potentially giving him a new deal, which means he could potentially fill that number 3 void, but we'd still need a number 2 in the event that Aaron Ramsdale leaves the club this summer. Look, we're going to continue on with this. We've got so much more to get into. We're going to talk about the striker situation, the wide man situation. We're going to talk about a Benfica star that's been linked with Arsenal. We're going to talk a couple of other players that have been linked in the past but continue to be on Arsenal's want list. And we're going to do the Victor Osimhen piece right after this short pause. So don't go anywhere. Please do leave a like, subscribe, all the rest of it. You know the drill by now, and we'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Chronicles of a Gooner, the Arsenal podcast with me, your host, Harry Symeou. Okay, let's talk strikers. We know that Arsenal are keen on Benjamin SESKO. We know that the club are working hard to try and do a deal ahead of the European Championships, partly because you'd want to get this kind of thing wrapped up as early as possible, but also because Benjamin SESKO has a release clause that expires at the end of June. Now, that would be sort of midway through the European Championships, and obviously logistically, and given that he'd probably want to be focused on playing for his national side, it's probably a lot harder deal to do during that competition. So ideally, you want to wrap this up nice and early. And if I just go back to Gunnerblog's page on Twitter, he did add something on Benjamin SESKO a little bit later on in the day. In fact, this was a little over an hour ago. He said, it's important to mention that on Benjamin SESKO, Leipzig are still making considerable efforts to persuade him to stay. They would like him to sign a new contract that removes or increases his release clause. The next 2 weeks could be pivotal. So this is the thing. If I were Benjamin SESKO and I wanted to move on, the idea that RB Leipzig want me to stay, but only if I'm going to allow them to either remove my release clause or significantly bump it up, that would that would put me off those negotiations. Because listen, at some point or another, Benjamin Sesko is going to want to join a bigger club than, with all due respect, RB Leipzig. And the higher that release clause is, the more difficult that is going to be for a club to make happen, right? So Benjamin Sesko, I look at him now and I think, what, £55 million? It's worth a bit of a gamble. It's worth a bit of a punt. And obviously Arsenal will have done their due diligence and will feel that he'd be a good addition. So yeah, let's go and do it. But if you turn that release clause from £55 million to 75, 80 million pounds, all of a sudden my opinion on it changes, because the risk factor becomes significantly greater for the buying club, which could put clubs off. And if Benjamin Sesko has an off season next season after deciding to stay at RB Leipzig, then that release clause becomes even more of a problem, unless Leipzig are willing to do a deal at a lesser price. But the point I'm trying to make here is that if you allow them to do that, you are giving them back all of the power and all of the control over your destiny as a footballer. And I understand that loyalty comes into play and all the rest of it. But if I were Benjamin Sesko, I'd look at my position now and I think I'm in a power position, because the price that RB Leipzig are asking for me now, because of that release clause that exists, is a reasonable one, which could get me my dream move as I continue to develop in my career and continue to try and improve and show, my skill set off to sort of the wider footballing world. I don't understand why he would sign a deal that removes or dramatically increases his release clause, unless he plans on staying at RB Leipzig for the long haul. And I don't know that a player that talented should be wanting to stay at a club like RB Leipzig for the long term. But hey, lots of comments on this. Joe mentions the Manchester City news. We touched on it right at the start of the podcast. It was an impromptu addition to the running order. Do check it out. If you haven't done so already, feel free to rewind or watch that bit back a little bit later on. Mafia Boss says, what's this nonsense that Chelsea could snatch him from under our noses? Look, Chelsea could very easily go and trigger the release clause, same as us. But if he picks Chelsea over Arsenal now, then do we even want this guy? Like, I don't know what to say. If somebody can sit there and logically come up with a case or put forward a case as to why joining Chelsea would be a better move than joining Arsenal right now, then something's missing in between the ears, and maybe he wouldn't be the guy for us in that instance. But look, let's get back to the striker talk based around this piece from James McNicholas. He also mentions, as well as Arsenal being still interested in Sesko and this update that we've just provided you, he also mentions Alexander Isak, a player that a lot of us would love to see join the Arsenal this summer, but a lot of us obviously believe that is very, very unlikely. Do I think that the price that some Newcastle fans are quoting of like 150, 160 million is ridiculous? Yes. Do I think that there's a potential to sign him for less? Yes. But it's still going to be a significant amount of money. What James McNicholas says on this is that Newcastle have no intentions of selling Isak, and therefore there are no developments expected with regards to a potential move to Arsenal for him. We mentioned a little bit earlier on that there was talk of Arsenal looking at different attacking options, not just number 9s. Pedro Neto has been named in this piece as someone that Arsenal is still pretty keen on. I have my reservations about Pedro Neto, which we've discussed before. I won't go over them again at this point. And Nico Williams, of course, who plays his football over in Spain, is another person who is on Arsenal's radar. He also mentioned Benfica's Joao Neves is a player that Arsenal have been looking at for a little while. Midfield player on the radar of a lot of the game's biggest clubs at the moment. But Fabrizio Romano put out an update specifically on Joao Neves earlier, which I think kind of pours cold water on the idea that Arsenal are going to be able to get this young man during this summer window. He says that Benfica's stance on Joao Neves is very clear. He has a 120 million euro release clause, and there are no plans to negotiate for his exit this summer. So either pay up or shut up, basically, is what Benfica are saying. He does mention, too, that Arsenal are among the clubs that have been monitoring him for months. United and City also included in that report as well. So, yeah. Okay. In other news, Martin Zubimendi and Uriel Hato, two players that we've heard Arsenal link with quite a bit over the last few months. They are under consideration even still. Will that materialize into actual deals being done? I don't know. What does the Declan Rice assessment and the outcome of that mean for maybe somebody like Martin Zubimendi? Listen, I like Martin Zubimendi, but I did an episode on him a little while back after I'd watched him a couple of times in full. And I'm not sure he's got the physical presence to play as a 6 in the Premier League, I think technically he's fantastic. Would I trust him to receive the ball under pressure? Would I trust him to break lines with his passing? Would I trust him to get us on the front foot purely through his technical ability and intelligence? Yeah, absolutely. But I think in this league, more than any other league, more than any other top flight league, you need to be able to take care of yourself physically. And that's the bit with Martin Zubimendi that I'm just not sure about. So we'll have to wait and see if that turns into anything. He's been pretty adamant, though, throughout that he wants to stay at Real Sociedad, that it's his club and that he's got no intentions to leave. So you feel like there'd have to be a lot of work being done in the background in order to persuade him and convince him that this is the right move. What's going on here? Hold on a second. Why is everybody going on about Chelsea? Have I missed something that's just broken or something? Chelsea are not. Chelsea are only going to sign Benjamin SESKO if Arsenal don't want to pay the money for him. It's as simple as that. Because, why anybody in their right mind would pick joining Chelsea over Arsenal at this stage is wild. I'm just checking through X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and there's no signs of that. There were some nonsense reports coming out saying that, Chelsea could pip us to the player, etc., etc. What's that based on? He's got a release clause. If you want him, pay it. If more than one club agrees to pay it, then it's down to those individual clubs to negotiate with the player and make him choose them. Nobody in their right mind would choose them over us right now, because you don't even know who the manager is going to be in 6 months' time. That's another factor. You can easily go in there, a bit like Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang did, to join up with Thomas Tuchel, and that manager be out on his backside very shortly afterwards, and you'll be following him behind very, very closely, as again happened to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang. I do want to turn our attentions to the Victor Osimhen stuff that I was mentioning earlier on, because you're probably thinking, why has he brought Victor Osimhen into the discussion again when a lot of people were saying that it's not possible? The reports in Italy are very, very confident that Arsenal are in the mix for Victor Osimhen. It doesn't mean that we're going to sign him, but I'll give you an update on what they're saying and how I kind of read the situation right after this short pause. Okay, so as the story goes, Napoli are in a position where they want to move Victor Osimhen on. He is someone that has been pivotal to them in recent seasons, was massive in their Scudetto win, and will always be a Napoli legend for that very reason. However, they're bringing Antonio Conte in as the new boss. He has indicated to them that work needs to be done on the squad, which requires funds. Now, Napoli don't have these funds available and will be seeking to raise some of those funds through player sales. And I'd say there's a couple of players in that squad that are worth a heck of a lot of money, Victor Osimhen being one of them. Kvaratskhelia probably being the other one. And there are a few others in their ranks, but Osimhen is the one that you feel like, because of how scarce the good striker market looks at the moment, they could raise quite a bit of money from. Now, we talked about it yesterday. They do have a release clause in Victor Osimhen's contract, which is worth about something in the region of 120 to 130 million euros. However, indications from Italy are that Napoli would accept less. Some are reporting that they want 100 million euros, which is some 20 or 30 million euros less than what the release clause is. Others are reporting that they do a deal at even less than that. Now, Di Marzio, who I mentioned right at the top of the show, is looking, or is saying, I beg your pardon, that Arsenal are one of the clubs that have made their interest in Victor Osimhen known, and that they are there. They are having conversations, albeit through intermediaries, but that the price that Arsenal see as reasonable is just nowhere near that release clause, is nowhere near what Napoli are looking for at this stage in the window. Now, as the window goes on, maybe when Antonio Conte has got his feet in through the door and under the desk, he might say, come on, guys, we need to get on with some business, which might put Napoli in a place and in a position where they need to accept less than what they set out to get for Victor Osimhen, just to make the deal happen and to move things along. We talked about all the reservations we have about Victor Osimhen yesterday. So again, I'm not going to repeat all of that stuff just a day later. But I do find it interesting that despite complete denial from this side, the only club being mentioned as a club that has a genuine interest in Victor Osimhen from, the big boys is Arsenal. And Arsenal are not the only club, guys, that need a striker this summer. Like Chelsea probably need a striker. I think there are other clubs. I think you could argue that Manchester United need a striker. I think there are a lot of clubs in the market this summer that need a striker, that are looking for that type of centre forward talisman / leader. And Victor Osimhen's got the track record. He's done it in one of the big leagues. He's won a Scudetto with Napoli, which was a really, really impressive feat and achievement. And he played a massive central role in that. So why is it that it's only Arsenal that are being mentioned and only Arsenal that are being discussed? That's the bit that I find weird. And that's the bit that kind of keeps me slightly interested in this story. Maybe slightly interested is the wrong term. Curious as to where this is going. Now, I'm not saying that we should go and pay a load of money and get Victor Osimhen, or that I would even entertain moving up into the region of 120, 130 million to get this deal done. But for Arsenal's name to constantly be mentioned, it does suggest that maybe, just maybe, some initial contact via intermediaries probably has taken place. And if Napoli or Osimhen's representatives feel like a deal needs to happen this summer, then throwing out the names of clubs being interested, it might just prompt others who think this is too good an opportunity to miss to come to the table, to enter negotiations, and to potentially come with formal offers. I don't know. I just feel like if it was an agent trying to steer something, or Napoli trying to steer something or create something, they could go, well, Chelsea, Arsenal, blah, 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 Saudi Arabia, etc. They're all interested in Victor Osimhen, and try and create this bidding war. But the fact that Di Marzio only references Arsenal in his latest report, to me, keeps me curious on this. Let me know your thoughts in the live chat section on this. If I could just quickly ask as well, if you haven't done so already, guys, please do leave a like on the video, because there are over 500 of you with me live right now. We've only got 107 likes on the board. If only half of you hit the like button, we'd have 250 likes by the time I click end stream. If you could do that, it really, really does help. Also, subscribe to the channel if you're brand spanking new as well, because that really, really does help me too, as we look to continue the growth of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. I'm so grateful for all your support. If you could go over to the audio platforms that you listen from as well and leave me a review, I'd be really, really grateful. We need those Apple Podcast reviews desperately. We need those Spotify reviews desperately. So please keep them coming too. That really, really does help. I'm going to finish off today's episode by getting some of you guys' thoughts from the live chat and a few of your questions as well. So please start chucking them in, and I'll take as many of those as I can before we wrap up. Paul Nell says, why are we the ones used by agents so much? I think it's to do with the fact that we are in a good position in comparison to a lot of other clubs. Another bit that James McNicholas mentioned in that piece was that Arsenal still have quite a bit of headroom to work with when it comes to the PSR stuff. He also mentioned that the owners are expected to make significant funds available for transfers. So maybe it's because we're one of the few clubs that could potentially do this deal. That could be a reason for it. Yeah, it does feel like we get used quite a bit in terms of our name gets thrown around to try and generate bidding wars and all the rest of it. But yeah, it's interesting. Caleb says we should stay far away from Victor Osimhen. Barney Bernardo says, no, Osimhen is not for us. He's overrated. This is really interesting to me because if we'd have been doing this podcast or having this conversation a year ago, everybody would have been jumping up and down at the idea of Victor Osimhen even being a serious target for Arsenal. And we're not saying that we know that this is happening or anything like that, but just the mention of his name, it's being met with such negative responses, which I think is really, really interesting because I don't think we would have been in this place a little while ago. I'm even seeing, dare I say it, people saying we're fine with Kai Havertz. Same Kai Havertz that half of the fan base wanted to bomb out 6 months into the season. It's really, really interesting, isn't it? How the tables can turn. What else have we got? Adair says, unrelated, but are you heading across the pond to cover any of the Arsenal pre-season? As far as I'm aware, my friend, I'm not. And I would have done this year. My plan was to come over for the pre-season. But unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, I'm obviously really, really grateful. But it looks like, fingers crossed, I'm going to be going over to cover the knockout stages of the European Championships in Germany, which means that I'm going to be away for a lot of the summer anyway, probably 3 or 4 weeks. So that will make it difficult for me to also do the Arsenal pre-season trip. But if I can't do it this year, I'm definitely at least planning to do it next year because I just think it would be such great fun and I expect Arsenal to do it again. But yeah, because of my commitment to going over and covering the Euros, I'm not going to get to do that, which is a bit of a shame. But I've never covered professionally an international tournament, so the prospect of that was massive. The idea of that's massive to me, and I can't wait to be able to do that if it all comes off, of course. What else have we got in the live chat? Joe Musashi says it was his AFCON performances which have put people off completely, but he's definitely an Arteta striker. He's a pressing monster, better than Jesus. I got a lot of stick in the comments of yesterday's show for saying that if he is a good presser, I haven't really seen it. Is it because Napoli don't do it as a team in the same way that Arsenal do? I really don't know. But I got a lot of stick for saying that. I mean, I'll just show you guys this. If I bring up Victor Osimhen's FB ref page, and I guess this can kind of help shed some light as to maybe or back up maybe my side of things here. So you say that he's a pressing monster, and I'm not even doubting you. I've watched a lot of Napoli, but that's never been the thing that's come across to me about Victor Osimhen. If I look at his scouting report and I look at sort of tackles, he's in the 14th percentile of players that he's been directly compared to. So he doesn't make many tackles. In fact, he's one of the lowest tacklers in the top 5 leagues because that's what he'll be compared to. So it says here, player compared. 1 second, let me highlight that so you guys can see it. Player compared to positional peers in men's Big Five leagues, UCL, UEL, over the last 365 days, based on 2,515 minutes played. So he's been compared against his peers, and he's in the 14th percentile for tackles. He's in the 44th percentile for interceptions. So he's not particularly successful when intercepting. He's in the 6th percentile for blocks. Those are three things that I'd expect him to measure far better in if he was this aggressive and effective presser that some people tell me he is. And maybe I need to go away and do a little bit more homework on him. I thought that my assessment was pretty spot on, given that I've watched a lot of Serie A over the last few years, and I've seen a lot of games in which Victor Osimhen has played. But it seems like a lot of people are of that opinion that actually he's a very good presser. Am I missing something? I don't know. Perhaps that's another debate for another day. Okay, guys, I am going to leave it there, I think. And I will be back with you guys tomorrow at the same time, 5 p.m. UK time. We'll be live with all the latest Arsenal news. Remember, you can download the Chronicles of Gunnar to listen to on the go if you prefer to do so via your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the usual places have it. Make sure you leave a review on those apps too. And please do leave a like on this video if you are watching us on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel as well if you haven't done so already. Can we get to that 250 like target? In fact, loads of you are going to watch this video after it's finished streaming as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a like target of 1,000 likes. Now that's, no, you know what? Scrap that. That's way too ambitious. 750 likes. Can we get 750 likes on this video? If we can, I'll be over the moon. And I'll tell you what, if we get to 750 likes on this video, I'll do a giveaway and we'll get a prize out to one of our listeners / viewers. Right, I'll see you all on the next one. Until then, have a great Tuesday evening and Wednesday, depending on what you're up to. All the best up the Arsenal, and I'll see you all soon. Goodbye.